Good morning.
Morning.
How are you, Lisa?
So fine.
Are you ready?
A bit nervous.
It's okay. That's so natural. That's definitely the thing. But I'm really excited about your session. I'm so happy you've been with us. So, you guys, Lisa has been with us for pretty much all of our office hours. So now, she is hosting the Data in the Air We Breathe. And I love the title. That was such a catchy title. But I'm really excited for you to be here. I'm really excited to learn. So, we've got enough people here. So, what I'm going to do is turn this over to you and to let you know that we're all here supporting you. So, remember, it's just our little small group. And you look great, by the way. You look camera ready. You smiling, got the lipstick on. Girl, you look good. This video is going to be really, really popping. So, congratulations to you. But without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Lisa, because we didn't come here for me. We came here for Lisa. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa so we can hear more about the data in the air we breathe. I love that title. So over to you, Lisa.
Thanks everybody for joining, and thank you, Annie, for the introduction and obviously the conversation that we've been having. And yes, I've been joining the office hours. They're quite intriguing, so I think I love them. They kind of give me a little bit of motivation during the week. But I'll go straight ahead. Let me just share my screen. So just a small intro. My name is Lisa Mbwia. I actually can't even see everybody here on the screen, so just bear with me because I have a double screen. My name is Lisa Mbwia, and I work in the geospatial space, mostly in the agriculture sector and the climate sector. So I did just wanted to talk about opportunities in the space industry, especially women who are doing technology, data analysts, data engineers, machine learning, and what are the opportunities that are actually there. So I'll take you through a little bit of what we do. So I use the data, the air around us, because it's space, and space data comes through air. So I just had to use that aspect. And then I'll also take you through the technology, the overview, and the applications and examples, challenges and opportunities that are there, and how do you actually get started, or how do you even proceed? And if there are any questions, we can actually go ahead. So I have like three aspects. I just need somebody to at least try to confirm to me if the slides are moving.
The slides look beautiful. Right now we're at the air around us. Is that the slide you wanted to be at?
Yes, yeah. So this is the
Okay,
current slide.
perfect.
So obviously we know what the air around us is. We do know about the gases that are in the air. We are fortunate enough with space and technology. Light can travel through air, so we can actually receive data into the air. So I always talk about the physical air, because every single particle tends to have its own level of reflection. So data in the air. Then there are data points every single day. There are multiple millions of satellites, not millions, thousands of satellites that are in space that collect information about the Earth's surface. Some of it is relevant to country-specific information. Some of it is global. Some of it is like half of the world, and some of it is, they track anything out of the space. So I would say these particular data points tend to be captured for, again, forests, pollution, borders, climate change, government mapping, interventions, monitoring, disaster management, you name it. But it's slightly static data because you have days and you have weeks on this, and it's millions and millions of information. So what does it entail? or what is our key, why this matters. Because I would look at it in the perspective of the amount of deaths that tend to happen annually, the level of losses that we experience, especially in the developing countries or sub-Saharan Africa or South Latina areas. So how much does it cost government in terms of climate-related health issues, and the losses that come with it, and also the impact it has on women and children? I would say mostly the vulnerable community. And then what can we typically achieve? These are just some of the few points, which are early warning systems. I believe like every government should really have early warning systems in everything. Data-driven agriculture decision-making for food security, health purposes, malnutrition, all these things tend to come into play. And then community air quality monitoring and respiratory illnesses, where we do love to get economic growth, but what are the repercussions when it comes to climate change or the effects of changing of climate, or just having different dust particles in a particular area? What does that come as an issue on that? Seems like I'll have to use my mouse. Alrighty, it doesn't go to the next one. So, so just the challenges we tend to work towards. So current challenges we do have, not everybody knows aspects about data, trust me. Some of us, we are fortunate, we tend to know even the back end and the front end. Some people, that is not really one of those particular interesting things. They just want to know how to use an instrument. And for others, it's just out of curiosity. So I'd say data access and literacy gaps, those are our challenges, and they go with different phases and levels. And then we have limited ground truthing validation data. So I'll give an example. There are current satellites that we have in space, but there are locations where we would do ground truthing. So there's an Italian sort of space agency in Malindi, as an example, that does help with ground truthing and launching of satellites. That helps also aggregate the GPS point. Ground truthing also would be just an aspect of, you use Uber and you go to a specific location every single day. So it tends to validate the type of data. So that drop-off zone tends to give you that accuracy in the GPS point. And that's what we call ground truth validation. And then also aspects such as infrastructure constraints, especially in remote areas. So we would be having houses, but what are the key infrastructure location points that we can say, we can use this area as a ground truthing place to get our information or accuracy of the GPS location of an area. What are the opportunities? Our low-cost sensor networks. So many now we have like opportunities to launch satellites. I would say if there was a meeting in 2016 and it was aspects with the Airbus, and like, we need access to satellite information, very good satellite information. And somebody said space is money. And I didn't see that, but then there was an opportunity apparently just from, I think, years ago, $1 over taxpayers' money converts to $10. So you can imagine how much it costs to actually launch a satellite sensor, but what do you get out of it? Community science initiatives. So it's not only just about conservation. We know there are aspects of such as forest monitoring, forest conservation, trying to track if there are forest fires, who is cutting trees, who is trying to develop in a forested area or something in those lines. So these tend to work particularly in that. Mobile fast data delivery. Uber is an example, Bolt is an example. Those are test grounds. Just using Google Maps is just one of your most basic examples that has actually helped evolve aspects in data delivery. And then AI-powered predictions, good data, good predictions, bad data, confusing predictions. So we can't just launch AI. So This comes also, this is what we typically have. So the visible data network, you don't get to see this most of the times, but they are organizations in globally who tend to track these satellites for particular purposes, and the type of global coverage and the use case. So they would be based on the use case. Then there's also ground sensors, opportunities such as telescopes that are there to give this information. I would say maybe radio telescopes that tend to manage our radio TV works. That is a design of a telescope that I've seen that literally tracks data from out of space, atmospheric or in terms of astronomical data in space. And then sensors, small sensors in the school, anything. An example, a small sensor would be like the way at the moment Mawingu launched, has a satellite sensor. It helps with rural fiber network connectivity. They've partnered with Safaricom, and what they've done is, because the fiber cannot get to those particular areas, the satellite dish that is set is used to get data points from the beam, and then you can actually access internet. Slow, but at least that's development, especially if you work in the rural communities. And for all this, again, every molecule, every data point tells a story. Okay. So these are just the examples. I use these ones because this is for land monitoring. These are the common ones that I tend to use. The Sentinel, which is a European Space Agency satellites, goes. This is what gives you what you call it, data from weather stations. So the 15-minute data information that you receive, it's this. I think so. And then there is MODIS. MODIS also maps larger areas. So it covers larger areas and it has a faster rotation. So you can get to do a large area coverage of what is changing on the landscape. And then Landsat and Sentinel tend to be the same, but Landsat is for NASA. So just a little bit of basics on what Earth observation is, because there are people who talk about GIS, they talk about Earth observation, they talk about machine learning, they talk about AI. All those things tend to fall into this aspect. But what does Earth observation in relation to having satellite imagery mean? It's a collection of the data that is analyzed, all land data. It's actually in situ measurements, so you don't get to extract anything. So it's mapped images. And then it's mostly evidence-based for usage. Another example, the drones that particularly used for taking images were like for events and whatnot. They add different types of cameras, and that is also a sensing instrument. So I usually also sometimes use the phone as an example of a sensor because of the sizes, the pixel size of the phone, and anything that goes, like how do you take a picture? Why were you taking that picture? And then the GPS point is attached to the picture. So that's one of those data characteristics that come with it. But don't use it when you explain to someone, don't use the phone particular. If somebody doesn't understand that, you can use the phone, but that's one way I tend to relate to Earth observation and remote sensing. Then remote sensing is the technique in which you get the sensors. So for instance, there are two types. So you have the active ones. These are the ones that can move during the day and during the night. They emit their own signals. And then there are the passive ones that the Google Map that you get to see. The terrain or how you see the Earth is mostly your passive sensors. They have to use natural light. Some like the active sensors will penetrate through the clouds, and others, those other ones will struggle because they use light. The concept relies on lights, which I think makes it fun. So different speeds of light, different wavelengths, with different frequencies affect tend to be picked up on this particular sensors. So they have different types of wavelengths that they pick in these sensors. So how do we do it? So this is where simple data processing comes in. So for us, we have different types of processing, but it's the same design. Obviously, you collect your data. For us, it's mostly with satellite sensors. There's a way you interpret images, and there are different colors that you play with just to get specific aspects of the landscape. There's algorithms, so this converts precision. So simple things such as random forest as an algorithm or support vector machine as an algorithm is used particularly for analyzing this. And then you have your GIS platforms. So anybody who's doing mapping, the data can be extracted into tables, saved into a CSV file, map it on as a time series or as a change detection or as something those lines. And then just pattern identification. So this tends to be more also a visual thing, and then you go on the ground. So how do you see the changes? So those patterns that you tend to identify. This can help, especially, you're mapping a land area and the land, you're trying to see the direction of people moving from one area to another. So are they moving north? You will see by the images the number of houses that are being built over a period of time. And that's how you decide how urban planning is and why are they moving towards that location. Then any other factor would be market influence. Do they have, how much are they making? What is the reason? Do they purchase? So those are the now questions that you would ask after most of just the identification of that. Mobile apps to deliver. And then the tools that we use, Google Earth Engine, freely available. And also they do have bodies and bodies of satellite imagery. Mostly using it through JavaScript. Then there is Sentinel Hub. This is mostly hosts the European Space Agency data. NASA Worldview. So this is one of the, I would say, sort of groundbreaking, because during the time we were doing research, Worldview data was inaccessible. So I would say now it's quite accessible. And then there's local quality air maps. This would be done obviously through ground weather stations that we have. So this is just an example of how we do processing. The final aspect in decision making is the imagery. So this was a comparison of a satellite imagery, took the data, cleaned it, analyzed it. This was the visual aspect. But now for the decision making, you would be able to determine where are the locations affecting vegetation issues. So this is just one of the images. This is low vegetation, if you see here, in terms of the color, and this is what you get as the other type of vegetation. This is also, you do it as a comparison to time and location, as in time. Was it raining in August last year? Has it been raining in August this year? You do a comparison and see, was there changes in vegetation? This could be also just one of the impacts, such as people could be planting crops and harvesting at that particular time. So as you can see, there's a water body here. Here it's less. So this is just one of those things that government or any other person can make a decision and say, by the way, we want to conserve this water body because there's encroachment, there's these things. And then I've just highlighted, I won't take much. I'll share the slides.
Lisa, I have a
So
question.
yes.
Okay, so go back to the chart you were at, right? So the in this chart, do you give this information to whom? Who would get this information?
So with this aspect, it was mostly an NGO that was looking to do water management, and it was partnering with government officials and the community. So you feed in, obviously you tell them this is the issue, this would be the point location. So instead of just randomly going through the whole district to find an issue, you can actually pinpoint and say, if you go through this particular GPS location and here, you would find an issue. If you go west towards this location in this district, you will find a specific issue. So it was more water monitoring, but then there was more that came out of it. They just wanted to map water resources. But for me, I was like, well, there's things such as agricultural activities close to the
Exactly.
water body. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was like wondering. Do farmers get this information? So yeah, it's very cool.
So the translating to the farmers, it needs to, I always say we need creative tech and we need people who can translate insights. So sometimes scientists don't know how to translate an insight. So you need somebody who can basically say what this particular aspect means to somebody who has never seen a satellite imagery or might never use it, and what kind of information do you share. So I wouldn't share something like your vegetation index is low type of thing. I would just basically share it as you need to do maybe particular practices because your land is always open. So find a way if you want to plant grass and all that. So it would be more of an advisory aspect as a start, whilst you get the, let's say, particular farmers or areas to adapt to particular climate adaptation, smart agricultural practices or climate smart practices that you would want and a country or a location to do. So the picture says everything. And this is where now visual analysis and the data analysis also comes in, because you can't just say it's an image. You also need to say the numbers, the percentage changes, why is it happening, why is it happening so those tend to also address the market just by having this particular image.
Okay. So as a follow-up, I know Felix owns a farm. So he's on here and he's like, can anyone get access to the satellite imagery? So, because, he'd like to see
That's a
like
good question.
satellite of his farm. Go ahead, Felix.
Yeah, I'll post that question in the chat, the question that you're asking right now. So if you could please elaborate on that.
Okay, so processed satellite imagery like this one then needs to be done by anybody who does data processing and understands the remote sensing processing aspects. But for you to get satellite data, it's there. The best place to also visually see where your land is, Google Earth image, they do have a platform. And you can just type in the location, just like the way we use Google Maps. But now this one, you can see it on a laptop on your phone and type the location or go to the location and pick it up. And you could actually see your land on top of the area. Well, you wouldn't see yourself. I need to tell you that. You wouldn't see yourself because it's data that comes either per week, 5 days or 2 days after. But it is as close as we can get daily data because of the type of satellite that is being mapped, that maps that particular area and in terms of what it needs to extract. But Google Earth will show you where it is. And at this moment, I think when you have a piece of land, like the surveyors give you a Google Earth image and then sort of put it like a square or digitize based on how the land looks like and says this is where your location of the map is, then it tells you the GPS. So you can always check consistently, but it won't give, you won't process. So you might need somebody to process the data.
Felix had a follow-up question.
Okay.
Lisa, so you said
Yes.
You said that Google Maps can provide us with the imagery, but the last time I was checking on Google Maps, whatever was there was like 2 years from the current situation. I've actually gone ahead and checked on Google Maps. They don't update it, let's say 6 months or 1 year, because my particular point of interest, whatever was there was updated 2 years ago.
Okay. There's a time series bar usually at the bottom of the screen. So I don't know if that has, if you have that. Also, it depends. If your area is not too active, then you would have like that particular issue. Because then you, like, obviously, efforts will be put into areas where, yeah, there's dust storms. That's where they will now put on the heavy monitoring aspect and send more information. But if something doesn't show a lot of change, you won't find a lot of images there. However, just check at the bottom because that somehow should have changed. And especially if you're in Kenya, yeah, there's a lot of monitoring going on consistently. And satellite data such as Sentinel tends to go after every single, I think it's 1 week or 5 days or 2 days. They keep changing, but that's good. So just the update on that. So just check at the bottom, there should be a time series. If not, I'll show you, I'll set up a meeting link and then I'll show you.
It's okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And just so you know, Lisa, Felix is part of our team under Lumo Hub. So, which you'll be teaching over there too. So just plug in that.
All right. You're welcome. So just a bit, just to see what interventions. From me, I come from, again, the agriculture sector. So drought early warning systems, this one I've stressed enough. We don't have them. We mostly have them, especially if it's big coffee plantations, because there's investment in such technology. But for farmers in the rural community, they don't have this. And usually it's a process. So you don't want to just extract and get information. You also need to know what are the socioeconomic issues that come with that. Crop yield predictions. For instance, I'll give an example. In Kilifi, there hasn't been long rains. Just this year, that's when they got good rains. But then all that tells you production has been very low. And that means farmers are not able to sell what they were able to sell. There are no irrigation systems. So those are the things that, as a person working in any sector, from selling, what do you call it, fertilizer, selling seed, all these are things everybody feeds into this aspect. Optimal planting window, people who actually bioinformatics people or biogenetics tend to work a lot on this. So reducing the time window to growth because, yeah, climate change. Pest management, you can actually get to see that, especially if it's a larger area, if there is pest invasion. So this is where we get the early warning for armyworms and all that. This is how it happens. Animals tend to produce a different type of reflection. So we get to see that, and then advisory services. Climate adaptation strategies. So this is where now the data that you feed, you get from different socioeconomic aspects, satellite aspects, you can now tend to address a monitoring aspect or saying a specific area experienced floods, and this is what happens in this particular area. Water resource management, the rates of evaporation happening at this particular area, how do we reduce that? Hyacinth, that's an example. There's an increase of hyacinth. Why? People are bathing in Lake Victoria with soap. And then now there's a lot of chlorophyll and a whole bunch of areas. And now we can't remove this. And how do you convert that? So all this tends to be, when you've mapped, you've extracted this data, what do you use this information for? And this is how we tend to create markets out of such information. And then last, health impacts. This is quite close to my heart. I'll also give an example. In Kilifi County, there's outbreaks of chikungunya and dengue fever. I don't know if chikungunya is the English word. Dengue fever, and then malaria. So you have 3 outbreaks, different types of mosquitoes. Where do they happen? What happens, and what temperatures do they come out and say, now we're going to spread chikungunya, as an example. So that's how you tend to track and say, in a particular area, you will always have a malaria outbreak, but at what temperatures and rainfall patterns, and the population that's going to be affected. Air pollution, construction, that is a no-brainer. Respiratory illnesses, if there's an area that has a specific manufacturing company, you will get to see this through the health aspects, but now you'll be able to map how far a cement factory is spreading pollution. Maternal health interventions for extreme weather, and also nutrition, as I indicated before, a main thing that for us as an agricultural country, we look into. I'm almost close to the end. So this is what we have. I just collected a few in north, south, east, west. This is the work that we do. So with the space agencies, so they're not sleeping, they're doing work. There is, especially when it comes to main key things that improve their imports or exports. So for instance, Egypt has EgyptSat for Nile data farming, but also desert tracking. It's very important. They are in a desert region. The South Africa Space Agency partners, but this carbon monitoring, they've worked with Digital Earth Platform. That's one of also freely available, accessible satellite data that is already processed. So it's just you to just make nice images out of it. Regional Center for Mapping and Resource Development in Kenya, they work with Severe. Severe does a lot of drought monitoring, a lot of outbreaks, such as armyworms, and they partner with other institutions, Ghana Space Agency, Ethiopia, partnerships, government-to-government partnerships, how just monitoring disease outbreak. Then Morocco again, and Nigeria also does, and mostly heavy on the public health advisories. So this would be based on, is there a lot of air pollution? You find a focus on that. Is there a lot of agricultural coastal erosion? You would find a lot of heavy investment in such. So if you find that something is very, very close to your heart and you see that it is a ripple effect in different economies, it would be a good case study to say, I could use satellite imagery for this, but aggregate socioeconomic aspects, environmental aspects, any other aspect onto it to just make things better. And then, I've already sort of mentioned, so interdisciplinary thinking, that's very important because combining both aspects across different areas, advocacy for freely environmental data transparency. It used to be difficult to get satellite imagery. Now it's accessible, and that's what makes it very beautiful because we have all these apps we tend to launch. We have all this, like, for instance, Jumia does delivery. How do you do it? What do they know where to market? The needs, just simple basic satellite monitoring, and then the data that is extracted, and then that's it. So it's always a continuous effect. Health equity, you don't have to be a public health practitioner, but you could have a sense of what really happens so that you can help. And this also comes with aspects such as green building, because green building feeds into this work. So start locally and think global. You can't change the world. Not everybody can. But if you can change what you have locally, and that really makes a big difference. and the features in your hands and the superpowers that you need. So cultural sensitivity, important in tech design. Yeah. These are the platforms that freely available learning platforms. I would say NASA has a good start learning platform. Then you can use the other types of data. So I've tested this one because I needed to somehow also go to the basics of learning. So this one would really give you good grounding on it. Then any questions?
So far, I mean, I'm just like fascinated with all the data. Let's just be clear, because I didn't expect to get all this information. The links that you mentioned for NASA, right? Is that that's a free website? You said.
Yeah,
Okay, let me see if I
these
can.
are all free. It's a free website. So there's a training platform. They're also training other training platforms. So the one that I mentioned for NASA is because I used it when I was starting off. So I tend to see what they have done in terms of their training. And they have like, if you don't know remote sensing from scratch, you can start from there and then continue with advanced stages.
Okay, and then also like when we go to data, it's only been the government and the small NGOs that's been asking for this information. Are there any other like climate action groups that are taking this information and saying, "Hey, let's support the community to make sure this happens," or is all of the like the lifting coming from the community that's advocating or wanting the change to happen in terms of the air quality?
So in terms of the air quality, usually starts with the community. If you're in that particular location and you find that you keep getting coughs, you will somewhere along the line find out that it is a specific company or manufacturing company that is there. Now, there has to be regulations because when they set up, they say they will do particular aspects. But now some people tend to be very lenient in their regulations. The advocacy can happen, but sometimes I always say it's sad. The economic gains tend to outweigh the other type of gains.
Right. And
So
then,
find it's mostly a community that will start off, and if it's engaging an NGO, obviously and it depends which type advocate NGOs, and then there are those ones that tend to fully implement a particular aspect. So they would engage that person, but mostly everything tends to be a miss when it comes to policy making and then also the implementation of that particular policy.
okay, so then, like this is not, some of these things are free and may not be as comprehensive, right? So if someone wanted to hire someone like you, what is like approximate cost for a community to do that, to get a project like this started?
It depends on the level of the project. So this one is just mostly the data processing. But now, would you want it to be an early warning system? So if it's an early warning system, obviously anything that encompasses data, the type of data that you collect, how heavy the data is, where you store it, if you have servers and cloud infrastructure, and then the people will be processing and managing the algorithms and changing the algorithms. So how many would you need at a particular time? The dissemination, because training, takes a long time. Adoption takes a long time. So you'd train so that people can adopt to use this particular tool. So the cost of just setting that up is not just one person who tends to do it. I just know how to do it, but there is the infrastructure that allows you to consistently automate and make these processes easier so that the data that is disseminated is accessible to lots of people. So you don't even have a shutdown on the system. So that's what would typically be the higher cost.
Hmm. Okay. And then also, like, because you have this data and you now can project can you go back a few years? Does it allow you to also forecast a few years ahead?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I thought. So then with the back data, they can see what has happened with the land, the air, and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then based on the current
So
results, go ahead.
so for mostly when it comes to, when you hear that the earth is changing and temperatures are rising by this degrees Celsius, it's because they backdated that type of information. So they know, give or take, what people are doing in the population and the new stuff that is there, we expect a global increase of this percentage. So there are specific models that they feed into that they would do. It's predictive analysis. But the
Okay.
data usually would be pre-data, and then the current one that now you use to train it, using that the pre-data that you had and any other factor that you would add in to improve your models.
Okay. And have you seen any data where you're like, I don't even know why these people are not wearing masks every day when they leave their house? You know, have you seen any data where you're just like, wow, that it's crazy where they're at? It just something needs to be done right away. Um, if you have you seen projects where they said, okay, we see this, this is what we're going to do to fix it? Or is this also new that you haven't seen all of its full impact yet?
There are areas. For instance, now there is. I'll give an example. In Kenya, there's the Go Blue initiative. They've just done a draft to do land and sea monitoring in some sort of way. So obviously that encompasses the data aspect in Lamu. Now Lamu is a location, good deep waters, obviously for port security, but there's aspects such as conservation. There was something to do with carbon extraction, and everybody's moving away from carbon, but other countries are not. So those tend to be those issues. And it has been an issue for years until now. There is a sort of like, I think, a strategy that is going to come out on how to balance all that. There will be winners and losers, but it does take a long time. And you need to have, there's always a level of endorsement you need to get. So somebody who believes in this particular issue. If somebody doesn't believe in that particular issue, nobody would fund or pay for such an initiative. So it's mostly an impact issue and not impact, because you also need to choose when, especially with the NGO, you can't just choose people for the sake of impact. It goes also with reputation. What are they hiding? Are we greenwashing? So all those things that come with it is a specific private sector greenwashing. They're whatever they're doing, and then they cover the expenses of that. So those tend to play a huge role. So they would approach an NGO, they would approach a community, but how will it help? There is offsets to it, like rural electrification through diesel engines. There was an offset to that, but obviously they've changed that. But it did affect people for a period of time, and people complained. But it takes a longer time. By the time somebody says, yes, I think this is a big thing. Yeah.
That's so amazing. I first of all, I really, enjoyed this session because number one, I love data. So, that's always my thing. I'm like, oh, data, bet. Let's see what it's teaching us. So, and then secondly, for me, agriculture. I think it's important with things like this where we're able to tap into resources that helps us as we look to, develop out more farming programs. I know, like, Felix has his farm, so that's why he had such a huge interest in it. And also for me, as we look at certain projects, it's like I'd be very interested to see what's happening in the area around me. So once we get situated in those areas and be like, okay, Lisa, you mentioned, you know, can you show be. So be prepared. We're gonna keep you busy. So, as we're doing like final questions, like what made you get into this area? What piqued your interest?
So when I was young, I didn't know something called environmental sciences. I just wanted to do geography and sciences at the same time. So I got to uni and I was told that's actually environmental sciences. So I started off as an environmental scientist, still passionate about it. I didn't go into the policy aspect. I stumbled in this field because we were students who are doing international relations and all those things. So space technology was basically security. That's what it was. And then I was interested in it because I was like, wow, you could actually just pick up information. I think the one thing that was a big thing for me was when I was doing my honors subject, when I presented the concepts, it was you could still do and reduce cost of monitoring by just having a satellite imager. Costs of monitoring, tracking, any other thing, analysis over a larger area, you could reduce it by having freely available satellite data. And you can get more information out of it and precise aspects of it. So that's how I stumbled in remote sensing. I enjoyed remote sensing. I also did GIS, which obviously is mapping. I would say your analytics that comes in and data engineering. I would say that's where GIS falls in. So data structures, databases, and all this. So I combined all of them, but the processing of the satellite imagery was wow, because I could do change detection. I could predict. It's fun. So that's how I stumbled. Quite a new field. For others, it's a new field. And I think what makes it interesting now is that 60% of what's happening with AI or machine that has just been basically happening in that sector. So we're just like, oh, we just like the fact that there is now natural language processing. So we're like, wow, this is now going to be big. Because now you're just not getting data points. You can use words to just extract.
Okay, you mentioned AI, so sorry to cut you. You mentioned AI, which my next favorite subject. We all love it, but we don't like it. You know what I mean? But you mentioned AI, so now let's pull in AI and into the analytics data, right? So now with that AI component, would it just come in and at this point just like say, hey, we noticed this and this and this. Because of this, it's going to spit out all this information about the community itself. Is that what it's being used for? And is it just doing a data dump into AI sometimes as a summary?
I think so. I wouldn't typically answer that well, but I'll try to. For the remote sensing people, it's mostly the machine learning. That's where it's heavy on machine learning and algorithms and predictions. So that's what typically, for us, we always say that's the aspect of AI that we work in. And you can do image segmentation on it. The other aspects, I think they're quite new. Okay, for me particularly, would be quite new, but something that I would consider to delve into. So there is, how do I put it? So there is extraction of the data, I think, and also there's also always a focus on have we done changes across a period of time? So now, what does it tell you, or how do you make it? Someone to understand this kind of information is where now we need to somehow change that and put it out there so that anybody can actually translate what a satellite image is or what Google Maps is or what does it entail when you're doing any aspects of that. But most of like the hard work, the machine learning, all those things, yeah, that's the computer science stuff that now most of us we typically enjoy. But the problem solving and giving good feedback is where now sometimes most people struggle with.
Okay, so now you mentioned that you combined a lot of degrees in order to get here. So, I mean, which makes you a very smart person because I barely want to stay in school, but I've had to go through it. So now tell me, as a person that says, I am very interested in doing what she's doing, what route would you tell me to go to first, and so on and so forth?
So it's just mostly it's basic certification. If you do know maths, statistics, same thing that happens the data process, maths, statistics, algebra, thinking, problem solving. That's important. It's not a black and white type of thing. Because it's like going into intuitive feedback. So the data, if you know how to analyze data mathematically, all that is very important. Then your domain, what do you want to get out of it? So for people who are in health, they already do stats, they do public health, they do stats, they do all those other things. So it's easier for them to go into that aspect. Anybody who's in finance and they're looking at transport and delivery and logistics, because they already know the maths that goes into that, it's easier to go into it. So it's not once off, it's just the domain. And then now to understand the data structures. So the data structure is basically an image. So what does it entail? So it's not your tabulated format type of image data structure. It's mostly image. So how do you understand which type of wavelength extracts a specific location or built up or farmland or any other thing that comes into it, even snow. So if you are able to know that or understand electromagnetic waves, then you're good. But domain, if anybody from any domain can actually go into it. I've seen people come from different sectors. It's just that when you're studying, you're like, do I have to do this? It's like going back to school or trying to do physics. And you're thinking, why am I doing physics? But it makes sense, guys.
Okay, so one more question. Um, what is the one piece of advice that you give to people um, that are looking to enter your space? The one that you didn't get. What was the advice that you didn't receive that you learned on your own?
I would say keep learning. Even if, okay, we're still learning and we still, I would say for myself, for me to call myself a data professional, I'm still learning the ropes. So you do have people who have like a ground sound type of career ahead. For me, I've gone across. So just learn and ask questions, but they don't be scared to ask. Even if people push you back, just find a way and figure out and ask. I think that was the one thing that took me through when I was studying. And even now, I still get to have that. So I ask questions when it's I need to know about a specific thing. And be curious. I think curiosity is a very important thing. When you go to a location, I'll say enjoy and understand why the location is like that. Specific aspects that are tied to your work. What can you get up? What can you learn from it? How can you help? What can you get out of it? I think those are also one those things that I usually would advise you.
And Lisa, Felix has one more question.
Lisa, it's actually my last question. I understand we might be running out of time. So, other than Google Earth, is there another platform we can get this free satellite imagery? Because with Google Earth, I kind of looked at it and it's kind of, they don't update it as frequent as I would like.
Yeah, you might need to process this. So far, I just know the Google Earth because they have a like huge database, but I'll check for you.
Maybe you
It
need to
should be
do another
Sentinel.
session on how we can read these maps.
That's fine.
Yeah. Let's do a follow up,
Yeah, that
because
would be a
you
good
know,
idea.
yeah, because we are interested in, where we live. We are super interested. Could you please come back and do a session that is strictly just allowing us to see where all the data lives and what we could use? Um, you pick the date. We'll be here, and I know the rest of the
All right.
team's eager to learn. But this is one thing we definitely want to follow back up on. So I just want to thank you so much for being able to teach us today. We definitely want the follow up session, so that this way we can go through the maps and we can learn to see how they're using these maps much better than we could just on our own. So we appreciate you coming back to show us that information.
You're welcome.
All right,
Thanks,
cool.
everybody.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to have a part two, which would allow us to learn more on how to use these maps, and be, for people that are thinking about farming, such as myself and Felix, we're very interested to see, how maybe potentially we could use this data for the projects that we're looking to get into. So, everyone, have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. And Lisa, thank you for being so amazing. Not only does Lisa support us every Wednesday during my office hours, it's just sometimes me, Lisa, and Shannon. But we have amazing conversations. So just to see her here and doing her thing and being the professional, as we like to say that she is, we thank her for coming today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you at our next program.